When I first started doing math through 3rd and 5th grade, it was more like a guided instruction, and there was rotations, but they were always teacher-directed rotations. So it was never really a matter of the student having the choice of where they wanted to go or who they wanted to be with. It was just the teacher was basically, I was telling them where they needed to be and what they needed to be doing at that time. Also, in doing that, there were more worksheets. There was more to keep track of, more logistics involved. And then just this past year, I really didn't even know the idea of math workshop existed in this way, having it being more of a student-driven approach. So we've really been doing it since like October, and then really full-fledged, not even until maybe late November. So we haven't even been doing it that long in this style. But we just like it so much better because it is student-directed. It follows along with our Daily 5 approach to language arts, so it's something that we were sort of familiar with in another curriculum, but then it was just taking it and morphing it into that math idea. So even though we haven't been doing it that long, we've already felt like our students are learning so much more. It's just so much more genuine because it's what they want, and so I'm liking it a lot more, the way I'm teaching with this approach.
I feel like the math workshop approach that we've been using has allowed the special ed students and other students that are struggling to have that extra time and not feel pressured that
My favorite part about math workshop is really the student choice. It's not so much teacher directed. The students are so much more engaged because they're choosing the activities that they need to do. Clearly it's guided by what the teacher is presenting them with. So in that fact, we know what they're doing. We have special things that we pick out to really make sure that we're sticking to the curriculum or whatever it is we're teaching, but then they don't really see it as the teacher's choosing for them because they are picking what they want to do, when they want to do it, and how long they get to do it.
I think my favorite part is the student choice as well, and I think the time that I'm able to spend with certain students that might be struggling, the flow of the classroom is just so much different. Kids are doing different things, but they're constantly moving to new stations and moving to new activities, and I think it allows me to be able to see a lot of the students and kind of see where they're at, if they're understanding it, if they're not, and then kind of helping them through that. I think when we started off, we weren't sure if our kids were if we were going to be able to get as much as we could out of math workshop. It sounded amazing, but we weren't sure if we could make it happen. I think it's allowing those students that before felt uncomfortable to share and to do things, to feel confident in those games, because they can learn one of those games and they can become an expert at it, and they can start thinking of new ways of how to do it and new approaches and connecting it to other pieces. I think it allows those students that are really struggling to have that time and that space to feel confident.
And what else I really like about the math workshop is if you came into the classroom, you would have no idea who's ESOL, who's special ed, who's advanced academics. You just wouldn't know because everybody's engaged in a different activity. They're engaged with different students. The way that we call groups to do guided instruction, it's mixed. So it just depends what we're trying to focus on. If it needs to be ability grouped or if it's just open and the different students are working at their own pace and sharing their different strategies. So you would have no idea what the students' capabilities are, and that's something that I really love. And the fact that we can work together so collaboratively with special ed and general education and just have this open atmosphere of everybody's a mathematician and everybody's going to get it in the place that they need to get it. So we plan together. We go over, in the beginning of the year, we went over their IEPs. We talked about, what the different needs of the students were, what the hour breakdown was, and then just how we were going to work together as a team. And we have our planning time together, and we're basically planning all the time. So we can work out who needs what when, if Stephanie needs to take a group at a certain time, if I need to take a group, how we're going to mix in the students so that they're not just special ed. But it's just a collaborative approach and just being open and talking with each other and looking at them as our students, not her students and my students.
And I think, I think it's been really good to be able to have where sometimes we're both pulling groups at the same time, sometimes one of us has a group and other ones are kind of monitoring, kind of asking those bigger questions to make sure that they're really thinking as they're doing those activities. And then it gives us some time to circulate, and we kind of sometimes talk afterwards and say, you know, this student was maybe having difficulty with one of the activities. That might be something that we want to touch on tomorrow. It allows us to work with certain students that we know on those must-dos might be having a little bit more trouble and need a little bit of extra support. And yeah, really looking, I feel like we get a better idea of the students that are understanding the concepts and are having a little bit more difficulty and need that reteaching, and maybe some interventions and working out. There's such an easy flow with the math workshop that I could easily pull a group for an intervention program within the classroom, and it wouldn't stand out, it wouldn't be anything different, it would just be another activity that somebody's choosing to do.
I think for the people who look at it and see that it's a harder approach, we've heard that, we've felt that, but we just, after taking the class, we just dove in and we said, you know, why not just try it? It's been successful, it's something new, and you know, let's just give it a shot. And I think just trusting that it's something that does work, talking to other teachers in the county that have tried it and talking to them and hearing from them that it does work. I think it's just hearing the stories, and if you're worried about it or you're scared about it, just reach out to another teacher and talk to somebody who's seen it, who's done it, go and see it yourself, and just be open to it, because the one thing I hear from other teachers within the building is it just sounds like so much more work. And we've said it too, like, when are we going to have time to make the stations? When are we going to have time to prepare? But once you do it, it's not any harder than anything that we've ever approached before. If anything, it's more freeing because you're not tied to your seat, you're not tied to a certain time frame that you have to keep to. It's more open-ended, and really you just value this time of the students so much more rather than, can I get this done? Can I do this in a certain time? It just feels like more free and more valued.
I started math workshop for real at the beginning of this year. I've been thinking about it for a little over a year, and I sort of played around with some stations last year when a colleague of mine had been taking a class, and I just thought, I'm going to do it. I thought, we'll start the first of the year, and we spent several weeks practicing, getting ready, and then we just dove in.
How do you feel like it's been? How does this differ in comparison to how you used to teach?
I love this. I can tell you that the very first day that we did it for real, you know, we had their tickets, they had the stations, we had the lesson, everything. We came together at the end, and I said, how do you guys like this? How do you guys feel about this? And the first comment from someone who is on his way to the AAP program next year was, you gave us choices. We've never had choices. We always been told what to do in math. And that's what I feel has been great. They have choices, and I feel like once you teach them how to do everything, it works so smoothly. It's really been great. I would say it is a little more planning at the beginning. Just the idea that you are doing something totally different and that you've got kids moving around to different places. It is, at the outset, a little bit more planning. It's worth it. Once they know how the routine works, how the structure works, coming up with different activities is easy. It's just the idea of figuring out who's going where that might take a little bit more planning. But in the long run, you get so much more you get so much more knowledge of what they're doing, of what they can do, and the best part is that you know exactly who can do what. Sometimes I make the decisions as to who I'm going to be working with. Well, I should say I do it in a couple of different ways. Sometimes it is when I'm walking around the room and I see that so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so aren't getting it, the next day I'll pull them all together. Some days it's totally random because I want the strugglers to see what some of the other kids can do, and I want the other kids who can do it to see that strugglers can get it. So some days it's homogeneous, some days it's heterogeneous, some days it's totally random. I will tell you what I love most about it. I never learned math this way. I learned math, we all sat in rows and we all instantly knew who the smart kids were. We instantly knew who didn't get it. And I was always one of the ones who didn't get it because I wasn't fast enough. I love that everybody in this room feels like they can do it because they can. They don't have to race. They can show their thinking in a different way. They can do great on the iPads. They could struggle with flashcards, but it's okay because we still get it. I also love, for me in this class, I love that the really, really smart kids who always have been told how smart they are can understand that there are more ways to get to an answer than just the fastest. And they learn to be a little more flexible. I think it's just been amazing.
Okay, well, it's my 7th year of teaching. It's only my 5th year in the county. I taught 4th grade for 2 years, and then I taught kindergarten for 3 years and moved up with my class to 1st grade. And kindergarten was kind of probably where it all started because kindergarten kind of lends itself to, it kind of naturally to using manipulatives and having stations and all that stuff. And I kind of just fell into math workshop kind of on my own, not knowing what it was, because I was really tired of like ringing a bell and transitioning station groups. Like stopping my teaching or stopping my group, or some groups would need 20 minutes and some groups would need 5 minutes and some groups would need 10 minutes. So it became a management thing where I was just kind of sick of it felt like I was wasting my time moving groups from stations. So kind of coming up with a more fluid model that allowed kids to still have manipulatives, play games, but allowed me to pull groups kind of just naturally free flowing as I needed. Probably what I love best is that it kind of frees me. It was kind of hard, I think hard to do and hard for a lot of teachers to let go at first because it's kind of scary. You're like, what's gonna happen? But once you do, you realize how much more time you have to actually do all those intervention groups and actually make that meaningful for the students, and they love it. The kids like embrace it and they're so excited to play the games, and they really love the routines of, they come to the carpet, they know there's going to be some sort of number sense routine to start their day, start their math time. And it just kind of, it just works. It feels very natural once you do it. It's less work. I feel like it's less work. I kind of add games in as we learn them and then take away old games, and then you have a plethora of games that you can throw back in as a review later on when you're trying to bring back fractions or something. You can throw a fraction game in there and say everyone needs to play the fraction game this week as a review. So it kind of is less planning and less work on your part.
How do you get a group of 1st graders to do this?
I guess it takes time. It takes, you kind of have to step back as your role of teaching the small groups and stuff for, a good 2 to 3 weeks where you're really practicing the actual process of math workshop and watching them play the games and instilling all those routines and practicing the routines. And then sometimes it falls apart and you have to, instead of having a reflection at the end where we talk about math, sometimes we have a reflection where we talk about our manners during math workshop and were we being good mathematicians or not. And those check-ins kind of help make it flow or continue to be successful. off with just a couple of colors, and what they do is they come over here, they have their names in a basket with a picture, and the reason that I feel like especially for younger grades I use a picture is because I can quickly look over and see who's supposed to be where without having to read the names and see something so small. It also is a really quick visual because the reason that I have 2 reds here and 2 greens here is that a lot of our games are partner games, so they know that 1 and 2 are red, so they have to be partners together. 3 and 4 are greens, so they have to be partners together. So I can quickly tell, oh, you're supposed to be, you know, Rachel's partner. If Rachel and Yair are here, and I see Yair being Jason's partner, I can quickly say, oh, you guys are on the red, so you have to be partners, you have to work together. It also is really quick and easy because when I call them to groups, they can come and take their name down and leave the spot open. So if they're at my table, their name's not up here. So Rachel puts her name here, and then she goes and finds the purple box, which they put backwards. But they know how to flip them around. And then she would take the purple box and find a spot to play. And then if Yair comes, he knows that he's not number 1, so he has to go look for Rachel, because Rachel has the box and they've already memorized what's in all the boxes. I don't even have to write. Like, I started off writing these, like, changing, then writing the thing, but they're first graders, they can't read the names of the games, most of them, and they just kind of memorize what's in what box, like that. I mean, I introduce a new one, I tell them, you know, I only change 1 at a time, it's not like I change them all, so they kind of pick up on what's in what box.
How does it work with first graders making choices?
They do really well, and sometimes, I mean, I think it gives them ownership over what their math choice is, and also, you know, some kids tend to love to pick, you know, red math game every day. So if I notice that, you know, someone is picking red, this is like the 2nd or 3rd day, probably the 3rd day that they've picked it, I'll be like, you've played that twice already this week, so you need to pick a different station. So, but for the most part, there's so many fun games in there that they don't pick the same one. Right? And when there is a really fun game, like bowling subtraction, really fun. So I actually made a list so I wrote down who was there for the 4 that were there that day, and then would read their name off and be like, you can't go there because your other friends haven't had a choice. I've done it before where I've had their names in the top of the box, and they check off as they've gone to that station as well. We just haven't made it to that point.
Is there anything else you would want to add for somebody who's getting started or thinking about Math Workshop or like currently taking the class?
I would say that you should just give it a try. I mean, it will fail. It will probably have days where it feels like it failed or something. You know, it might feel frustrating, but if you give it the 2 to 3 weeks that it needs to start, then I promise that you'll feel relieved by the way that it works.
Well, I started with Math Workshop kind of in a loose way, just pulling small groups and letting my kids kind of do centers, and then I took the Math Workshop class and I learned a little bit more about kind of how I could take what I was already doing in math and refine it and make it more student driven, and I think that's what I like the most about Math Workshop, is that it's really student focused and that it's more of a guided discovery of the big math ideas, and my job is not necessarily direct instruction, which is what I spent a lot of time doing prior to learning more about Math Workshop. I would, sit up at the board and tell them, well, this is what you do when you get a problem like this, and I would maybe have like 4 kids with me, and everybody else would just be like, Miss Vance is talking about something again. So it's a lot more student focused, and I love that they have the opportunity to share with each other, and you hear all the time that they learn mostly from each other. They'd rather hear a friend tell them what to do than listen to me tell them what to do. So if I can harness that into learning and have a friend help them out with a math strategy, they'd be more likely to practice it and apply it. And I think that's what I'm trying to do through the centers and through the sharing and the guided math groups. I think if you set clear expectations and provide them with a structure that allows them the choice, they take ownership of it, and I think if they take ownership of something, they're more likely to be able to handle it. I think they really like having that responsibility. It's kind of the same concept of giving them jobs. They like having like a job to do, and so kind of giving them that choice of, and it took me a little bit of back and forth. I started out with a really loose structure, and I said, well, these are the things that I'd like you to do today, but it doesn't matter what order you do them in, and that was a little too loose for the group that I had. And then I kind of pulled it back and made it really tight, and I said, here's where you're going for 10 minutes, and then here's where you're going, and it was too much structure. And I think it put a little more on me and less on them. So providing them with that kind of a balance really helps them kind of focus and also, you know, have the choice. And I think if you give them your expectations and show them what they can do, and if they know what to do, they do a good job, even when they're 5 and 6 and 7. So I started off by not pulling groups as much. I kind of gave them, and like I said before, I kind of played around with different structures. I would have a really structured, you know, here's your center, here's where you're going, in 10 minutes I'll ring the bell and we'll switch. And that was too much structure because some of them were really into a task and I didn't want them to stop, whereas others would finish a task in 5 minutes and then they'd have to sit around. So then I kind of pulled back and I saw what was happening when I said, make your choice between these 5 different things. And that was a little too much structure, so I kind of found a balance in between. And I said, here's what I want you to accomplish first. This is like your have to do. And I tried to also echo it with what I do in language arts centers, kind of structure it in a similar way so that they have this similar expectations. Here's what I have to do, and then after I accomplish that, here are my other choices. And within those centers, I can kind of pick what I want. So I did a lot of setting it up and then doing it in small increments of time. You know, we do our centers and I'd let them do it for like 10 minutes. And I'd walk around and see how they did. And then I'd pull a group. And then I let it go for a little bit longer. And a little bit longer. And then eventually I started it and I pulled a group and I saw what happened. And they were, if you give them the responsibility, they can be independent. I think Math Workshop is just a really flexible structure, and it's what you want to make it almost, and it's a way to teach math in a way that helps students take ownership of math and the concepts, and it helps them connect ideas and I think develop a greater conceptual understanding of what you're doing. I feel like my kids this year just have such a strong number sense because of the routines that I do in Math Workshop and because of the opportunities that they have to practice those things and to continually practice them with each other and by themselves. So, yeah.